ladies. I know it's been a while, but here we are. Time to go back, way back. The Wayback Machine. Back when territories ruled the world. Back when there was wrestling in all 50 states. Back where stadiums were packed, arenas, coliseums, VFW halls, youth centers, high school gymnasiums, packed to the rim with real life people sitting within 6 feet of each other. And when it wasn't called sports entertainment, when it was professional wrestling. This, my friends and ladies, is the wrestling historian. We're going to go back to September 3rd, a somewhat important day, an innocuous date to some, but for what transpired, makes it important. On September 3rd, 1954, it was the first NWA meeting. Now, the NWA annual meetings used to take place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it started in 1951. But this was the first one that took place in St. Louis. September 3rd, 1954 was the first of the annual NWA meetings that would take place in St. Louis, because it would remain in St. Louis for the next 31 years. And in that meeting of the first one in St. Louis in 1954, for those of you who don't know, the NWA in the 50s, throughout the 70s and 80s, was the largest governing body of professional wrestling in the United States. It covered 33 states, and it seems like every state or every territory was under the NWA, including the WWF. So in the annual NWA meetings, that's where all the promoters would come together to discuss bylaws, contracts. Other wrestlers would say, hey, my guy wants to wrestle in your territory. Would that be okay? And they would do trades and swaps, and where they would discuss who would be the future NWA champions. And it all took place every year in St. Louis. Now, at the first meeting in St. Louis, you had Sam Muchnick was there, the stalwart promoter from St. Louis, Frank Tunney, Leroy McGurk, who ran the Mid-South back then.
McGurk.
Jim Crockett, Stu Hart, Paul Jones, the promoter Paul Jones, who ran the Georgia territory at the time, Don Owen from Portland, Roy Welch from Tennessee. They were all at the first one in 1954. Throughout the years, names would change, and when different territories with different people that ran those same territories would show up. So the names would change from those that I just named to Fritz von Erich, Eddie Graham, Bill Watts, Vince McMahon Sr., Giant Baba, Carlos Colon, would all take part every year in the NWA annual meetings. And it was there, like I said, it would stay in St. Louis for the next 31 years. And it was there that the NWA determined who would be that's where they decided the next 22 NWA champions were at that meeting in St. Louis every year. So they would get together and it'd say, okay, which is why certain territories were rewarded. Fritz von Erich, I mentioned Fritz von Erich and Eddie Graham that would attend these annual NWA meetings. Fritz von Erich and Eddie Graham at different times would in fact wind up being the NWA president. They were always on great terms with all the other promoters. They were fair. Eddie Graham had probably the best mind in professional wrestling, where other promoters would come to him for ideas, for trading talent, because Eddie Graham groomed some of the greatest wrestlers that the NWA has seen. Under Eddie Graham, both Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk and Jack Briscoe and Dusty Rhodes all became NWA champion under him. Because of Fritz von Erich's long-standing with the NWA, Kerry was given the NWA title. It's no secret that David was being groomed and was on the short list to be a future NWA champion. The list was in early 80s was Ric Flair, Ted DiBiase, and David Von Erich. of who would be the next NWA champion or who would be the future NWA champion. It was there they determined who would be the Missouri State champion, which was the number 2 title in the NWA. I've said many times on this very podcast, whoever was a Missouri State champion, by and large, was seen as the NWA's a future world champion. Like Terry Funk, Bob Backlund, Jack Briscoe, David Von Erich, Ric Flair, Kerry Von Erich, all held the Missouri State Championship. So it was seen if you can carry the top title in the NWA's home base in St. Louis, you could possibly be a future NWA champion. So whoever was Missouri State champion got a lot of eyes on them, and a lot of guys who held it didn't go on to be world champion, but still their names were a made guy. So guys like Ted DiBiase, Dick Slater, Kevin Von Erich, who would be the Missouri State champion, would still their careers were made because that made them a made guy in the NWA, and they could write their own ticket to any territory they wanted to after that. But the first annual, it was the annual, but the first NWA meeting that took place in St. Louis in 1954, and like I said, it would stay there every year for the next 31 years until Vince McMahon Sr. Vince McMahon Jr. went once, I believe. I think he went with his dad in '84, but I think that was it. Because now the idea of Vince being in a room with any other promoters and they all having to come together and agree on one thing or would be, to borrow the Princess Bride, inconceivable to think right now that would happen. But back in the day, all the promoters would get together, would go to St. Louis. I'd be either at a Hyatt or a Regency, and they would talk about the direction of the NWA, and they would decide who would be the next NWA champion and other champions going forward. But it took place September 3rd, 1954. September 4th, a couple of birthdays. Happy belated birthday to Kia Stevens, who I believe would have had a tremendous career had she stuck with her original name of Awesome Kong. She turns 43. Her time in TNA, she was the highest. Her segments on TNA were got the highest ratings in TNA history. Her matches with Gail Kim were legendary, and back when there was a wrestling war between TNA and the WWE, there wasn't much of one, but when they got the ratings back, the highest segment always belonged to Awesome Kong. And I thought she was just as far as a power wrestler goes, not even talking about females, I thought she was like the female equivalent of Vader. She looked good. She didn't sell a whole lot because she wasn't supposed to, and she was just dominant, and she could move. I thought her time in the WWF was terrible. Karma was a lousy name, but if you're going to use Karma, they should have called her a bitch instead, because Karma's a bitch, and they didn't do it. Instead, they had her come down the middle of the ring and cry
I
because
don't
she
even want to talk about that.
Okay, well, we don't. Well, but
friggin' angers me to this day.
Thankfully, she got her best rub and her biggest push on the hit Netflix show Glow, where she got to play a wrestler, and she knocked it out of the park. And she did absolutely amazing. Still is. Glow season 1 and 2 are on Netflix. Give it a look. But Kia Stevens, happy belated 43rd birthday.
My favorite stories about Awesome Kong is Dutch Mantell talking about booking her in, how he was booking her in TNA, and how he walked in one day at Impact, and he overheard her being told, you should sell this more or leave your feet more. And Dutch told him to get the F out of there, and made sure she understood, no, you're the badass. Right. You're the unstoppable one. Never leave your feet unless we tell, unless it's until it's time. And we tell you, we come to agreement that it's time for you to leave your feet. You never leave your feet. Ever.
Exactly. And that's why she was booked correctly and why she was so over, and she still the most dominant female pro wrestler that there has been. But happy belated birthday to Kia Stevens. Um, Happy 34th birthday to a guy we were just talking about in our last HIAC Talk Radio. Uh, whether he's using his real name or not, he's a highly entertaining individual. I've never been a fan of his wrestling work. There's never been a pro wrestler that I enjoyed more outside of the ring. So happy belated 34th birthday to Xavier Woods.
Ah, yes. He's
Consequences Creed, Austin Creed, Xavier Woods. Um,
remember, Saltines will tell you he would not have a career outside of wrestling if it wasn't for them fans.
yeah,
He has nothing else to fall back on except for a PhD, you
yes,
saltine crackers.
except for a PhD and a very thriving internet career.
Nah, who
I mean,
cares?
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
have an opinion. Dance for me. Yeah.
Also September 4th, 1995. This is another case. So do you remember where you were, Dan? September 4th, 1995. I know you weren't in Bloomington, Minnesota,
Mm-mm.
because that's where the Mall of America is, the world's largest mall. And that's where, of all places, WCW decided to dip their toe into the Monday Night Wars by having the premiere of their brand new primetime show called WCW Monday Nitro on TNT. And that's where. Do you remember that the? I know you remember the telecast. Do you remember the main event of that particular show, Dan?
It wasn't Hogan and Big Boss Man, was it?
It was, except it was
Yeah.
Hogan and Big Bubba.
Big Bubba, excuse me. Big Bubba. My
And
bad.
do you remember what match that Lex Luger returned to
Sting and Ric
WCW?
Flair.
Yes, it was.
Come on. I'll
That's
tell you
where
what the
Sting.
opening match was.
Go ahead.
It was Jushin Thunder Liger and Flying Brian.
Yes, match of the year.
Probably match of the year,
Yes,
yeah.
it honestly was. And do you remember the WCW Tag Team title changed hands?
Oh, you caught me on the spot. Now I didn't. No, I don't.
Well, the
I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed.
unbelievably, the team of Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater lost to the American Males.
Huh.
Yes, Scotty Riggs and Marcus Alexander. I'm sorry, Stars and Stripes. I apologize. They won the WCW Tag Team titles, and the debut of WCW Monday Nitro. Obviously, the big story: Lex Luger, who wrestled the night before in Canada, in Newfoundland, of all places, but no longer under contract for WWE. Walked out of the crowd,
Thank
and
God.
there he was, and that was still one of the biggest shots, and not going to be the last time that a wrestler that fans and everyone else thought was a WWF wrestler showing up on Nitro. But opening shots were fired uh, September 4th, 1995, on the debut of WCW Monday Nitro on TNT, which incidentally did a 2.9 rating that night.
I do remember Mongo being on the broadcast team.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, Bobby and him, the only time Mongo was manageable is when Bobby was feeding off of him. And there's one line I remember in particular where, Mongo alludes to him not knowing what it would be like to be an athlete and be on on the football team. And Bobby quickly, like right away, responding with, "I don't want to play. I'd rather own the team." Oh, good one, Bobby.
The magic of Bobby Heenan is that he can make anyone, including a brain dead I apologize for using that term, or
Yeah,
stiff,
bad timing on that
bad
one.
timing, they're having a stiff like Mongo, even that he making a
Stiff's
stiff
good.
like Mongo look good. And that's the magic of Bobby Heenan, how he can make anyone, even Steve McMichael, look good. But yeah, WCW Monday Nitro, September 4th, 1995. September 8th, yesterday. Happy belated 56th birthday to the man of many names, many identities, many different names. We talked about that in previous episodes of HIAC Talk Radio about people using their real names. Well, this guy had many names, but one, I guess, more in particular because he found the one name that he got, and it stuck, and it's his best one yet. So whether he's Scotty the Body, or Scotty Flamingo, or Scott Anthony, or Johnny Polo,
Uh,
Scott Levy's Raven is what stuck and what he's best known for. And happy belated 56th birthday to quote the Raven, Scott Levy.
just one of those guys I'd never approached. Just didn't look like he wanted to be there. Whatever, we were in the same
I
building, so I was like, I'm out.
I told this story, and I tell the story. I guess I tell it every year on his birthday. I did approach him at a Comic Con, a Wizard World Comic Con. He was, they always keep the wrestlers on, separate, and he was next to Virgil, wearing the NWO shirt, because Scott Levy, Raven, is also a huge comic book fan.
Yes, that's right. He wrote. Yes, I know.
He wrote a Spider-Man comic that he was selling for $20.
That was actually very good.
It is actually damn good. I didn't have $20 on me at the time, but I shook his hand, in a big meaty hand, and I told him what a big fan I was of his, and I'm looking at his comic book because I told him what a big Spider-Man fan, and then Virgil comes up and goes, "You wrote a Spider-Man comic book?" I think, yeah, and Raven goes, "Yeah, motherfucker, look at it." And but he was really cool. He was really cool to me. Shook my hand. I told him I didn't have $20, but I love the.
I'm not saying he's not cool.
Yeah,
I'm just saying the three instances we were in the same building were really tiny shows.
Yeah.
And and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna bother him.
But Dan, I was the same way with New Jack. I've been in close proximity to New Jack at least 3 times on shows and in ECW arena. And we were the only 3 people in this one area.
Nope.
Never said a word.
He was also at that one show, WrestleFest. It was WrestleFest.
Okay.
And it was a good show. But Dean will tell you, Dean was doing the MC that entire day. Just, come to this guy's table, blah, 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 and every half hour he'd do another announcement. And while King Kong Bundy was there, he was interacting with King Kong Bundy. He was having a great time, Bundy. Virgil was there. He was a little bit, hey, everybody buy my stuff, even if you work here. It was like, nah. But New Jack came in, and I'm not making fun of New Jack, because I have not a mean word to say about him, and even if I did, I wouldn't. But he said that he would, promote New Jack's table, and New Jack kept looking at him like he was going to kill him for some reason. So Dean stayed the hell away, and that made me stay. I was like, I don't think he wants to say hi to us right now.
No.
So I'm going to leave.
Yeah. Don't blame you. But I approached Scott Levy, very good guy, and find his comic book. It's really good. It's the origin of Spider-Man's first foe. For those Spider-Man fans, his first time, it was in the movie. He wrestled he got into wrestling to win the $5,000 because he needed money. And the movie was adeptly played by the late great Randy Savage.
Bonesaw is ready.
Bonesaw ready. I got you for 3 minutes of playtime. In the Spider-Man canon, it was a wrestler called Crusher Hogan. Now this is 1962, so this was light years before Crusher or Hulk Hogan. But the wrestler that Peter Parker took his first foe, the first person he ever fought as Spider-Man, was the wrestler Crusher Hogan when he beat him and won $5,000 for. Well, Scott Levy, Raven, wrote the story of Crusher Hogan, what led up to that. And that's what was fascinating because he used all indie terms. He talked about Crusher Hogan was a face and how the fans loved him, but they got stale on his act. So then he turned heel, and the fans turned out to boo him. But then that got stale. But because he didn't want to walk away because he loved wrestling too much, he then decided to fight people for real and started offering more money for people to fight him for real. First it was $100, and it was 500, and then he was beating up people for real, even though he hated it. But he knows people. The more people paid to see him, the longer he could stay a professional wrestler. So after $5,000, he was challenging people to come, and he was beating them. And the promoter finally, the first guy who hired him when he was a kid, he goes, "Why are you doing this, Crusher? I mean, people are coming. They want to see you. They hate you." He goes, "Yeah, I know. Because don't you see? I'm offering anyone that can come in and beat me. I want them to hate me. I want them to despise me. Because the one person that beats me will be a hero." And he flipped to the last page, and we see Peter Parker coming into the ring.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That doesn't get you a little...
Yeah. And well, Scott Levy, Raven, wrote that story, and it's a Spider-Man comic, and it's absolutely incredible. So happy belated 56th birthday to Scott Levy. I mentioned at the top of this Wrestling Historian episode, Dan, that the NWA had its annual meeting in 1954. Well, in 1991, the NWA, even though they weren't having their meetings, they're still officially a organization. In September 8th, 1991, they officially stripped Ric Flair of the NWA World Title. They did this because Ric Flair was going to debut on the WWF the very next day. Now, the WCW had already stripped Ric of their title in July when Ric couldn't come to terms with his contract, and because Jim Herd was Jim Herd, so Ric Flair walked. Well, the NWA took its sweet time and then didn't strip him until September 8th, and because of that, the NWA and WCW had two different world titles, and they really couldn't get together. And the NWA title wasn't another title again until 1992, when who was that beat Rick Rude, the Japanese guy? Forget. But anyway, that officially stripping NWA stripping Ric Flair caused the divide between NWA and WCW, and so Ric Flair was no longer the NWA champion as of September 8th, 1991. And September 9th, today, of all days, 1980, exactly 1 month after losing the WWF Tag Team Championship to the makeshift team of Pedro Morales and WWF champion Bob Backlund, the Samoans regained the WWF Tag Team title in a tournament, defeating Tony Gurria and Rene Goulet to reclaim their WWF Tag Team title. Exactly 1 month after losing it, August 9th, 1980, at the Showdown at Shea. And also on this day, September 9th, 1991, one day, Dan, after being stripped of the NWA Championship, Ric Flair in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, defeated Jim Powers in his first WWF match ever.
Well.
Yeah. And that, my friends, is a wrestling historian. And you can follow me, Craig Ligons, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram at CRAIGLIGGEONS.
Follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83, and that's at Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, too. Unfortunately, Tumblr doesn't allow porn anymore. And Facebook. Also at twitch.tv/DanLaw83, unless you're watching it on YouTube, which is vice versa, DanLaw83. To listen to the podcast on your smartphone, go to any podcast aggregator, podcast app, type in VOC Nation Radio Network, or just go to VOCNation.com. For Craig Ligons, the wrestling historian, I am the above average comedian. Wow.
It's easy for you to say.
Goodbye.